my first question to you is, I promise you, it's incredible. Okay, not to hype myself up here, but well, okay, it's not a question per se, but we might as well start with Leagues 4 because it is basically, well, matter of hours until our beloved game mode that's been gone for almost, what, 2 years returns to us now. And just to put some context here for the people who have been living under the rock and have no idea what's going on, Leagues is probably, I want to say it's the most popular game mode I think we've ever had in this game, and it includes like insane power-ups, relics, bonuses, boosts. I mean, just today we got a new relic, which it's something to definitely think about because shops are free now. I guess you could say that. Buy infinite onyxes, buy infinite construction supplies, food, weapons. Basically, you can get max cash tag and even more than that. So, what are your first thoughts on the relic?
On Fire Sale, the one today?
I mean, we can talk about any relic. We can talk about this relic. We can talk about anything, honestly.
I think Fire Sale is a really interesting one. I think it's something that rewards people who kind of just know, like when they're evaluating whether or not they pick this relic and they've got, you know, their regions in mind that they're considering picking, like just knowing kind of some of the niche things that your region might have to evaluate the true power of this relic. I think it's a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun in playtesting as well. I mean, there's some pretty obvious things that people can kind of do. I already see the League's Discord figuring it out. Things like you could just buy as many death runes as you want and then sell them for Tokkul, and then you can use the Tokkul to buy all the stuff in Moral Wreck, or just even, you know, in the Tazar area itself. So that's kind of fun and exciting. Even some crossbow enthusiasts are talking about how they now have access to a pretty like infinite supply of Onyx bolt tips for their crossbows. So that's pretty fun. So it's definitely got a lot of interesting dynamics. And I think it might not be the most picked relic in its tier. I could be wrong though, but I don't think that means it's not strong. I think that tier is very interesting, should I say.
Mm-hmm. For the first time in the history of RuneScape, people are buying uncut onyxes to make onyx bolt tips. So
for sure.
And okay, just to hype up leagues even more, I remember the original Trailblazer League had almost 300,000 players signed up. And honestly, it's a hot take here, but I think this time we might actually beat that number because the hype so far has been absolutely insane compared to previous leagues. I know you're excited. I'm definitely excited for this. What are your thoughts going into the leagues? I want to know what your build and regions are going to be, and we can even go over a few of the relics that's been revealed to us so far.
Sure. So I guess like my thoughts first are that it's kind of not my problem, I suppose, anymore for the league. For those listeners who don't know, I was very heavily involved in Twisted and Trailblazer League originally. I've kind of just been more like consultant-y for this one. There's a really talented team headed up by Arcane who've been doing a wonderful job with this league, and they kind of just ask me, you know, hey, what do you think of this versus this? I've been reviewing a few designs, getting involved in play tests. You know, they've reached out with some balancing stuff, and I've given my thoughts on it. So, but what that means is on release day, or I guess like afterwards, I could just be, I've booked some time off. I'm gonna be playing the league. I'm gonna be having fun. I'm not worried about the, you know, the things that could be broken or the things that need hot fixed or, you know, all this stuff. I mean, I'll naturally be keeping an eye on it still, but at least it won't be my problem, you know, working potentially slightly later hours and missing out on the fun, because, you know, I kind of got my like route planned out, what I'm gonna do. I don't know, maybe I'll be the person who's rank 1 league instead of solo mission this time around.
That's the dream, man. That's the dream. One thing I definitely want to try out is the 1000 invocation Toa. That sounds like an absolutely insane challenge to complete. I love to see like how is that even gonna look like? Like what's like Baba is gonna hit like a 50 through melee prayer or something like that. It's gonna be ridiculous.
Oh yeah, the harder mode stuff is going to be a lot of fun. I have both Chambers and TOA in my areas, so I'm going with Taranwin, Zaya, Desert, and probably in that order. So I'll have a lot of fun with some of these harder modes. It will be interesting to see how hard things hit, but also players are much stronger. They do way more damage. In some cases, like with Melee Relic, they even take like less damage. And there's some relics as well that haven't even been announced. So there's definitely stuff to offset that power, but I'm really excited that we're actually adding things that are changing about the actual content, I suppose, and then seeing how players can actually try and put the powers that they're gaining to the test. Because it is kind of, I would say, underwhelming. I think there's a lot of people who like to practice in the league, but if you're already really good at the game, you go into content that you've already beaten with no buffs, and you're just kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like a power trip. I just blast through it all. It's not a problem. Complete tasks, move on. I think having something that is just a bit more to sink your teeth into is kind of fun and exciting. And it's something I've wanted to do even since the original Trailblazer, but we just never really got the time to do it.
And I did hear that you have something special for me. I'm not sure if you can say or not, but apparently there are some relics that were supposed to show up in Leagues 4, but were scrapped in the last minute. And I wonder if you can tell me about them a little bit, because right now we've seen most of the relics we are going to be able to use during Leagues, and they're absolutely insane, like I mentioned before. So I'm genuinely curious which ones didn't make the final cut here.
I think the obvious one that maybe players expect that we tried is there was a bit of an attempt to make second inventory work again this one, but it kind of just came at the cost of we could probably get this working, but it's just too much dev time. Second inventory, for those who don't know, was supposed to be the tier 4 relic that was competing with the clue and the Slayer inventory one. It just allows you to smuggle too many things. There are too many places in our game that, you know, check if it's in your inventory, like your actual, like your bag inventory, and those checks wouldn't be checking in another bag's inventory unless we manually went and added it to all these places. And it would just be a lot of work. And it's one of those things where it's more the unknown. Like even after re-reviewing it, it's still really hard to conceptualize what that does. You know, like I think there's obvious ones players might think of. I could smuggle a Dawnbringer out of TOB, and we know like that thing doesn't work if you smuggle it out of TOB. But are there things in older content we haven't considered, or even just stupid things like you could theoretically smuggle bananas into the mage training arena, like graveyard thing? That's not massive, but like, you know, it is something where like people, like the developers of the day, did the checks correctly. Didn't assume that we would have another inventory in the future. The tier 7 relics went through a ton of changes. I can't really think of anything that sort of cropped up in my head, but you know, we really wanted to make these incredibly fun and enticing, you know, the relics in that tier.
Back to the smuggling out, I saw someone on Leaks Discord saying that Corrupted Gauntlet, Halberd, and the weapons you get inside the game, those are so powerful. So being able to bring those outside, that's basically game breaking.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think that we would have been safe with second inventory in the gauntlet because it is tied to an item in your inventory, and the gauntlet is very good about making sure you have nothing when you go in there. But those are perfect examples of things that we might not think of in catch. And it's one of those things where you start going, okay, these are the things we think of at the top of our head. Let's go fix those. But like, then you start like digging through code and looking for similar pieces of code. And you're like, oh, there's actually so many more. Oh, we never thought of that, right? So yeah, just a very risky relic that I wish we could have added at some point, but I think there's a lot of people talking about Banker's Note being kind of similar to second inventory, because second inventory, you know, you've got these longer trips, you can get more supplies or take more supplies in. Banker's Note's kind of doing that, at least. It might not help with everything, because if you get a lot of different resource drops, you know, the noting them might not save that much inventory space, but it's definitely giving you way more supplies to take in, which was kind of in the same veins as second inventory.
Well, maybe in the future, who knows? We'll see second inventory. Okay, perfect. Now, I'm sure you remember this, but for the viewers, there was a Kill and Gazette post back in April 2023, I want to say. And if you scrolled way down the bottom, you could find an article named A League of Our Own, which was by Mod Husky. And one of the very first things I noticed in that article was how you mentioned that oftentimes players get burnt out or just like blatantly quit leagues just a few weeks in. And as someone who has played all 3 leagues and has multiple Dragon trophies, that particular moment was so true to me. It seems like every league's about 1 month in, the fatigue kicks in, but you gotta keep pushing if you want that Dragon trophy. So oftentimes what happens, at least for me, is I play hardcore for a month, then I quit for a few weeks, and at the end come back to claim my Dragon trophy. Luckily this time around we do have static point thresholds for trophies, so essentially you're just competing against yourself and not against the other players. And you also found the perfect solution for the problem, which was to just make the competitive side of leagues 1 month long, but then allow players to continue playing after that for fun if they want to. So my question for you is, what was the reasoning to still keep leagues 2 months long this time around and not go with the alternative option you brought up? Is the team confident that they have enough content in Leagues 4 to keep players excited for 2 months this time around?
So I think the main goal, and what I was kind of getting at in that Gazette post, was burnout's a thing, and I think players kind of knew that. We knew it, but I don't think we'd actually properly acknowledged it in any sort of capacity outside, right? You know, the idea of players leaving the game for periods of time. And it's something we definitely saw players complaining about a lot, and it's something that at least kind of resonated with me, because I felt it as well. It really was a thing, I guess, more so for players who are pushing Dragon, or even like pushing Rune if they didn't have a lot of time. And it might have felt very obtainable in the first 4 or 5 weeks. But then the points just started ramping up drastically. You were going, like, if you weren't earning like another 1,000 points a day, you weren't keeping Dragon. And when you were getting to the point of an exhausted task list, you were kind of getting to the point of having to do tasks that you really didn't want to, or that you would kind of put off to the end anyway, right? That's how players go through the task list. They do the ones they want to do first.
Exactly.
So we knew we wanted to do something, and there were 2 lines of thought about, maybe it's the ever-changing point thresholds that burn people out because they think they're done, they think they're safe, and then they're not. Old school players, I think, generally like the idea of completing things, just saying, okay, I checked this off. I don't have to do this anymore, move on. And that extends a little bit to the trophies. I've got Dragon, I'm going to move on. Then they find out they have to come back, or they're uneasy, or maybe they're like, I have to keep an eye on this. I need to keep hitting refresh on this page. And that's just not like a good thing for players. I don't know how hard Dragon is going to be this time. I know the points required, but also we've changed a lot of things in the task list with all the tiers giving slightly less points, but also we have way more tasks, and we added a bunch. So it's going to be hard to know where that sits.
Sorry, I'm gonna interrupt you. Has the point threshold been figured out already, or is this something you guys want to monitor for the first few weeks to see how players do, and then put that point threshold out?
I believe the threshold will be set from the start. I could be wrong on that, but I at least have seen a point value internally.
Okay.
That's being discussed. So they might go with that and say that that's the thing. Obviously, it could be a bit more conservative and say we'll tell them 2 weeks in. But I think that even with 2 weeks worth of data, it's kind of hard to gauge where it's going to end up. We could probably compare to previous leagues and see, okay, week 2, week 3, previous league, they were at this many points. This time around, they're at this many. Okay, it'll make some sort of estimate, but you'll never get it perfect. And I think that we'll just kind of see if this fixes burnout. One of the things with something as complex as this, especially because burnout it's not really a logical thing, it's an emotional feeling thing. You can't really know what changed it if you change multiple things at once. You change 3-4 different things about a league, you're like, cool, players are saying they're not burned out. Which one of them actually changed it? Was it all of them? Was it none? Was it like a combination of them? And I think that one of the problems with the 1 month league for competitive reasons as well is you might just run the risk of leagues being dead after a month, where players go, cool, I got the trophy and now I'm gone. And for everybody else in the league, they're just not seeing it be active. And then that's sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy where people start leaving because it's not active and nobody's talking about leagues anymore. So that might have a detrimental impact on the people who are just taking it slowly and getting points. So I don't think it's necessarily like a silver bullet that I suggested, but I don't know. We'll see. See what the feedback is this time around, see if it's any better. I know that I certainly want a solution to post-league burnout if there is, because, I've gone through it 3 times now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think when I read your post about the 4-week thing, I definitely thought, oh yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, because it's happened to me 3 times now where I get into leagues, I'm super excited to do this. I do my tasks, I complete hundreds of tasks, and then start exactly what you were saying. The tasks that I don't hate them, but that wasn't my goal when I started leagues. But I know that if I want to get my Dragon Trophy, I do need to complete these tasks. So yeah, it's it's kind of like a dilemma. Either I do these tasks that I don't want to do, or I quit. Neither of the options are very good,
No, for sure.
Yeah.
Players don't like the idea of quitting or doing something they don't like,
Exactly. Okay, perfect. Now, I know I'm jumping way ahead here, but honestly, I am like a little kid in a candy store right now, and I bet a lot of other players want to know this as well. So my final question to you regards to leagues in general is that, do you think this game mode has any future in old school RuneScape? Is there a world where we can see this be an event that happens at the end of every year? Could we see a brand new Leagues 5 next year maybe? Or is this likely going to be something that happens whenever the team has time to make it happen? And before I let you answer that, and the reason why I asked this question, which kind of brings us back to the previous question, is because despite Leagues being the most successful game mode in old school RuneScape, I want to say, it does seem like it doesn't have that many long-term benefits. You see players get burnt out and quit after leagues. You see players not want to play at all because they want to progress their accounts on main game and not on a temporary game mode where all progress is lost. And of course, the most important aspect is taking up developer time to produce something that, well, isn't going to be permanent. But on the other hand, I think honestly, the only time I saw this much hype around new content in old school RuneScape was, I want to say, Dooms of a Mascot. So Leagues clearly is a success by just looking at the massive positive feedback we gotten so far. So in your own opinion, is leagues 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on something that could be annual thing that happens every year, or is it something that happens whenever there's a chance for it to happen? What do you think?
So I do want to preface this with I'm not actually part of the production team. You know, there are people who work in the team who are responsible for making decisions about, you know, what's going into the roadmap each year, making sure that, you know, we can keep our players happy and all this kind of stuff. So I don't know 100% when we would get, you know, leagues 5, 6, 7. Is a yearly cadence correct? Is it, you know, a year and a half or 2 years, that kind of thing? Sometimes, you know, even a lot of the time, to be honest, this roadmap is populated by, you know, player requests and stuff, you know, things that players are excited about. And when we didn't have a league last year, there was obviously a lot of like player demand to say, hey, do a league. Hey, rerunning Trailblazer even would be a lot of fun because we enjoyed it, you know. I think that leagues definitely has a future in old school RuneScape. I think that we can definitely still do new stuff with it that we haven't done before. I've definitely been chatting around a bunch of ideas with Arcane about it. It's kind of curious because Shattered Relics definitely tried something new with its sort of systems and power progression, and they didn't work out well, at least from my opinion. I think that a lot of players, like, there's been a lot of players who've said Shattered Relics was their favorite league and the one they like the most, and that's fine and all. But I personally didn't like the fragment system, and I think I've seen from a lot of players in hindsight that they're kind of preferring this whole choice. It's definitely creating a lot more hype and a lot more discussion, a lot more, hey, mine's better, yours is better and stuff. And outside of things like Endless Endurance and Last Recall, I generally think the selection thing has been a success. You know, you pick it, and as long as you're playing and using your plan correctly around your choices, all the relics are really fine. You know, they're really good. So I definitely think there's things that we could experiment with future leagues. Maybe there still takes on Trailblazer, even if it's like, let's go area locked, but there's some other systematic changes. Maybe we do open up the world again and try something new, you know, Shattered Relics. I do also want to say there's definitely an element of taking resources away from the dev teams that could be making permanent content for the game. I've seen that sentiment amongst the players, but also, you know, there are a lot of players who are equally telling us, hey, we really like leagues, we really enjoy leagues, and we want to engage with it. And, you know, we definitely see how full the worlds are. People really do enjoy leagues, and if our players are wanting us to do something that, you know, they enjoy, I don't see why we wouldn't deliver on that. I think that if it was at the detriment of the main game, like if we saw the main game suffering, you know, everyone's complaining that we're not getting content, but, you know, leagues is getting a ton of time, I think that would be a problem. But I don't really feel like that's been a thing this year. I've actually seen players complain that we might be doing too much content in the main game. So I feel like it doesn't really detract from the main game in those ways. And I think that leagues actually offer a lot more long-term benefit than is maybe apparent on the surface. This is all just thoughts and feelings from me. I think that I'm certainly not a person that can quantify this, but in games, people do want to be parts of communities that are thriving, you know, that have interesting things going on, you know, that are talking about, you know, not feeling like it's a dead MMO. And League certainly adds hype. It creates discussion. It gets people engaged and involved in the game, even if they're not necessarily going to play the league. You know, they see all this. So I think that, in my opinion, definitely has tangible benefit to the long term of the game, even if the dev time invested in the game mode directly might not.
Perfect. I was just looking up the numbers for, I wanted to get the correct number, 273,000 accounts signed up for Trailblazer. Just putting it out there, which is
that's crazy.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. And like I said, I do think we're gonna break that number this year. So
yeah, I hope so.
If that's not like a statement that Leagues is a success, then I don't know what is.
I completely agree.
Well, in any case, yeah, I am really excited for Leagues. I just like, it's been 2 years. I waited so long for this. I love Leagues. Leagues like is my bread and butter. I mean, I already told my grandmother, sorry, I'm gonna be busy for the next 2 months because I'm playing my video game, and she got confused, asking like, why am I playing one video game for months on end? And then I said, well, actually, I'm playing a video game inside a video game, you know, which made her even more confused. So I just I said, I love you, but I also love my video games. we called it there. And I'm glad so many other people shared that enthusiasm as well. So, you know.
Yeah, I've definitely done that in the past with my family and my wife especially, and said, hey, you know, I know we spent a lot of time together and stuff, but I need this week. I need this 2 weeks of like a game launch where, we'll still hang out and stuff, but, I might know life it a little bit, just letting you know, like, I'd really like to do that. And obviously I like get her support and stuff. So,
Funny enough, as like the player base gets older, and I do feel like old school RuneScape has probably one of the oldest player bases, because like at the end of the day, we did all start like decades ago, or like most of the player base, right? We were all kids at once. Now everybody has like a family, kids, wife, everything, right? And it's kind of come like full circle in a sense, where when you were like 10 years old, you asked your mom to stay up late just so you can play RuneScape, and now like it's the same thing. It's like, can I just take the weekend off just to play leagues, please? It's the same thing again.
it's definitely a different generational thing, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's relatable in some aspects. Even looking back, what would my dad have what would his equivalent be? And I'm like, well, he might have said, there's a big football tournament or rugby tournament at the weekend, and I'm gonna know life and binge and watch this, and I'm
Exactly.
sure that was a discussion that he had with my mom or whatever. And I do think that maybe the trope of gamers being older is kind of more true for MMOs. I think it's
Yes.
it's definitely a genre that feels like it's not pulling in a younger audience as much. At least there's a perception of that. There's definitely still, younger players joining MMOs, but there's definitely like looking at games industry, I suppose, across, you see games like Fortnite and Minecraft popping up, obviously Minecraft's not new in the slightest, but there definitely seem to be other games that are attracting newer gamers in ways that maybe we don't do, I guess. It's kind of hard to tell a modern gamer, I suppose, that this 10-hour grind, that's nothing. That's barely even content. I think that's something that doesn't resonate as much with newer gamers.
It's the classic. I can't remember what was the newest MMO that was released. I think it was at the start of this year or last year, and there was a Reddit thread that said, "Oh my God, I have to grind 15 hours for this item," and then like a RuneScaper posted down below said, "15 hours? That's child's play, man." So yeah, I completely understand where like this people that are like younger generation, they want that dopamine rush really fast. They want to get in 15 minutes. I'm done. That's it. I kill people. It's fun. And I'm done with it. I get my dopamine. But for RuneScape players, sometimes you spend hundreds of hours just to get that hit,
Absolutely. But it's worth it in the long term, right? You finish your goal, it feels good. You can post it to your friends or your clan, and they all congrats you on the goal completed. It's all about flexing, right?
Exactly.
Old school players love to flex, like, oh, you're only 90 runecraft. Well, I'm 99. I've done this for longer, Or even like our player base is weird in a way. They like to flex how dry they've gotten at a drop sometimes. Like I actually think some of our players enjoy going dry at something more or like obviously the extreme end of spooning is way more enjoyable because you could show off how lucky you were. But like getting a drop at the normal rate is kind of like boring. And then like if you go 50% of the rate, it's not all that boring. But like see when you get to like double drop rate, triple drop rate, people are like, oh no, you think you were dry at this is how I was. My grind was worse than your grind. There's kind of like a competition with our players to complain about like whose grind was the worst.
I swear I've seen that Reddit post so many times. The other, I've seen like this trend pop up lately where people post pictures for Mod Ash on Twitter saying they are dry and asking for luck. Which is like, hey, I've killed 15,000 shamans and I don't have a Dragon Warhammer. What am I supposed to do? And then Mod Ash says, why don't you just get the drop,
Absolutely. And I think it definitely comes from a desire from players feeling like what I'm currently doing isn't working. So I'm going to try and do something to change what I'm doing or something to fix it. It's of course nonsense. I mean, I don't know if many players know, like we genuinely can't just change a player's luck in the game. It would need to be like, we can't even target things on like username. I couldn't say run this code on this username. I could do something like if the player has 37 coins, a bronze scimitar and a mushroom in their inventory, the drop rate of this item is 0. But like you can't just do that change and then be like, hey, I gave you luck. Do you know what I mean? It's like a code. The code just doesn't work that way.
Okay, well, I guess that includes our leaks section. We got a little bit off topic there, but that's absolutely fine, man. Okay, so let's move on from temporary game modes or temporary updates and more to permanent updates. And one update that is coming to us in a few months, which is Varlamore. And with that, we are getting so much new content that I don't think we're going to be able to go through all of it today, but we'll try to cover as much as possible. I know you're not personally working on anything specific in Varlamore, so we can just talk about it like two players who love to see new stuff in this game. And I guess I'll start off by just asking, what content in that expansion are you most excited to see?
I think from an individual piece of content, the Colosseum is definitely up there. I think that is, something that is going to be echoed through a lot of our sort of high-level players in having this challenge. And for me personally, it was inspired from the Tactical Trials game jam, where we, have a wave-based system and you pick some modifier to make it more difficult, and you're gambling your loot with every wave, which kind of gives it a bit more meaning to grind through it, as opposed to Inferno, where like nobody cares if you got to wave 62 or got to wave like 30. You get like a bit more but nobody cares about Toggle, right? So it's kind of just like all or nothing on the end goal. So I'm hoping to sort of see like a positive reaction to this kind of take on a wave-based encounter. A little sad, I suppose, that I really like the Tactical Trials thematic, the blue volcano, especially with the Tactical themselves. There's a lot of like life and death kind of thematic inspired things I was gonna push to go down for that, but they've taken the at least the system, and that doesn't mean that there couldn't be another piece of content, involving the Tactical and a blue volcano that was wave-based that, had a different system, or maybe it doesn't need to be wave-based. Maybe there's just actually a bunch of like Tazar Ketrak challenge-esque things, I haven't really formed that idea properly yet. It's like kind of sitting in the back burner for me.
Funnily enough, I'm not sure who was the developer who made it, but it's actually pronounced Tasakal, and it's taken from my language, and it's literally a straight one-to-one translation for balance, which kind of fits the theme, I guess. But yeah, Tasakal means balance in my language, in Estonian, by the way. Just a fun trivia fact for you.
Oh, I had no idea about that. It makes sense, I suppose. I think Mod Ed is probably the person who came up with the name.
First time I saw it, I was genuinely surprised that something in my language is in Old School RuneScape.
Definitely fits, though. They're doing a lot of like life and death stuff, and at least that's where that quest seemed to indicate that they were.
Yeah, there was one quest where you had to, I think it was Arceus quest, where you have to like balance things out or something like that. But yeah, for me, it also like the Colosseum seems like up there. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, I think it was mentioned that every single encounter in the Colosseum is gonna be different, and there's gonna be multiple outcomes. So you really do have to come up with like a great plan to get to the furthest. And if you do get rewarded for it, which is great. And the reason why I'm so excited for it is because this might be a hot take, but dungeoneering in RS3 was the absolute best thing that ever happened, in my opinion. It was so much fun. Honestly, it was the only skill I was willing to train to 120. To me, just going in, I think there was, I want to say like at the start, it was probably like 20 different bosses. And they even added more later on. The different layouts and all of that stuff, just like the fact that it wasn't repetitive, which was like so fun to do as a player, I guess. And I'm hoping something similar this time around as well with Colosseum.
Yeah, I think that's the only comparison I can think of with dungeoneering, or similarity, I suppose, that it is hopefully going to be a different experience every time you go through. I mean, I'm sure players will eventually figure out metas and stuff. These three things are, selected. What do you pick? This is the best. It's kind of similar to a League's discussion, I suppose. But I think people always forget in a choice of three that sometimes playstyle stuff comes into it. If you play optimally, this is the correct choice. And I think the truth is that players don't play optimally, right? Like a lot of the time.
It's kind of like Inferno in a sense, where you see like different layouts now. Some people go with more defensive stats, some people go full offensive. It depends on how good you are, right? I remember, I don't know if you know this YouTuber called A Friend, but he tried out a strat where he was trying to do a 6-hour Inferno run where it just gets full full prayer every round by just using the Eldritch Nightmare Staff, I think it was called. And you just spec the monster, you get full prayer, and you just AFK the waves until you get full HP, full prayer every wave. He didn't manage to do it, but it was kind of interesting to see that we have speedrunners who managed to do Inferno in 45 minutes. And then on the opposite end of that, you have someone trying to do like a 6-hour Inferno, which is like everybody chooses their strategy.
I'm trying to think. Like I don't think I saw that video. I know a friend, but that's like a really cool idea that like you can theoretically just like steal enough HP by only doing specs and prayer and go infinite.
Exactly. Yeah, that was the entire purpose, is that you literally waste 0 resources until I think triple chats or somewhere close to that. So, but it didn't work out for him.
Yeah, I definitely like the challenge of that, even though I think if you're trying to do the Inferno, I think this is a mistake a lot of people make, is don't just play the SGS spec waiting game.
Exactly.
One, you get rusty. Like it's about like the adrenaline and being in the moment. If you're just waiting for special attack restores, like overly doing that, like sure, it's okay from time to time if that is like that's your way out, right? If you're uncomfortable. But I really feel like you just need to do it. You just need to keep pushing. You need to, try and figure out solves for like these later waves. Look ahead, see what wave 62, 63, 64 have. Look at guides on how you can potentially solve some of those problems. Maybe pray for a bit of luck on having a good spawn on those waves. And then the real thing is just getting experience at triples and Zuck. I mean, I know it's a bit of a tangent on Inferno, but they're not actually all that hard. Like, they sound scarier than they are, but I believe like for the modern gamer, reacting to a prayer every 1.2 seconds is fairly easy to do. Obviously, healers, are a thing. I think the biggest advice I always give to people for Inferno, even Jad, is if you need to change your prayer, don't click a healer. Wait till your prayer doesn't need to be changed and then click a healer. And it actually makes, like, if you've got that sort of framework in your head, it makes it a lot easier. But generally speaking, triples is a nerves check because people remember what it was like for their first Jad and stuff. And then for Zuck, like Zuck is extremely scripted to the point where you can go like, you can literally write out your plan of, okay, I'm going to make sure I've brewed and restored here. Like even for the entire Inferno, when you should use your range pots. Like I think I take 8 doses in and I know exactly which waves I'm starting with a range pot. I know how many I need for Zuck because I want to, heal up after each set. And I want to make sure I have a range pot for each set and a range pot for Jad. And you can kind of like work this all out backwards and stuff. But if you can kill triple Jads, you can kill 1 Jad while moving 2 tiles every other tick or whatever,
To me, Inferno is kind of like for the first part of Inferno until triple Jad, it's kind of like a chess game. You see a wave, you solve a wave, that's it. But I think one of the reasons why like 90% of Inferno attempts fail is fatigue. That's it. It's hard to concentrate when you've done like 90 minutes of waves or 90 minutes of solving waves, and that's where the biggest failures come from, I think. And I think that's good. Like failing once every hour is so much better than doing a 6-hour run and then failing. You learn so much. You can do 6 attempts during that time, which is like most people learn so much during those 6 attempts, much more than you would doing that 1 attempt.
Yeah, I completely agree. And especially with the fatigue stuff, I think that's something I was looking at with Tactical Trials for something to solve. I really do think the Inferno, up to like wave 28, 29-ish, I think there's a bit of, stuff to play around there with. Particularly you're trying to save supplies, and that's the point where you're like, you've got to deal with blobs and meleeers and rangers. And that, that's easy once you're used to it, once you're used to blob flicking and stuff. But I think that's the first part where people go, okay, I'm not just dealing with one thing, I'm dealing with multiple. Getting to that wave, the first 26 waves or whatever are kind of free. You've got a bit of a hiccup, then obviously like the major spawns and it basically resets, it's completely free. Like you could deal with a major and a blob and all this and it's kind of whatever. It starts to get a little harder at major plus ranger, but even then, like you very quickly learn pray mage, safe spot the ranger or safe spot the major, right? And then just deal with the wave accordingly. And then it obviously gets really hard moving into the mid to late 50s into early 60s, right? Where I kind of like my vision for Tactical Trials was, we can have these really difficult waves, like there are clear jumps in difficulty between them, and just have it be more about like, here's a 30-minute run to the final boss, and where every single wave is significant. That was kind of the, I guess, game jam vision for that content.
I don't want to say that Colosseum, like what I've seen from the news posts and stuff like that, is that it's gonna be probably something that all groups of players can do. Am I correct to assume that?
Yeah, I think that is the design goal. Whether that plans out is kind of hard to say. I think it's very easy to have design goals and then find that they're harder to accomplish throughout development. I'm just like saying that as a preface because I don't actually know. Maybe it's like really easy, maybe it's not, but I'm not directly involved in that project. I definitely don't want to promise something that they can or can't do. But that was the vision, at least that I know, was to sort of say make it a bit more obtainable. So we'll see how it plays out. But I think like just the idea that a player can comfortably get to wave 7, they might be able to do wave 8, but wave 9 is really hard. Kind of matters. And then a player might go and get gear upgrades. They might, do some more PVM, get a bit more experience, and they come back and they're like, oh, wave 7 was kind of my comfort zone before, and now I'm comfortably doing wave 9, and now wave 10's the problem. I think that means more than what Inferno has now, where it's just kind of, can you beat 63 or not, I suppose, and then can you beat Jads and can you beat Zuck? Like, there isn't really like a continual sort of measuring stick for your skill throughout the Inferno that's meaningful. Like, you hear someone say, oh, I can get to wave 50 compared to someone whose best wave is, I don't know, like 29. You're like, cool, whatever. It doesn't really matter. You don't really have any meaning behind that,
Mm-hmm. Okay, since we already were talking about Colosseum and how much variety it's going to offer, I want to talk about my next question, which is that in the last year, we have seen a lot of attention put on mid-game content. Things like Path of Glowfree, Perilous Moon, which is going to be also Varlamore expansion, part of that, which is going to be, I guess, kind of like Barrows in a sense, mid-tier content. Then we have the new Rat Boss that was just introduced, Forestery, which is also, I want to say mid-game. I guess it's available to everyone in a sense. I know JAGEX reworked the TOB entry mode, Muspa into the game, even something like Zero Invocation Doa. But at the same time, I don't know if you saw that No Monkey video where he was asking for more endgame content for the hardcore players, despite the fact that we just saw a few days ago a first group of players being able to complete Tombs of a Mask at 600 Invocation raid on time, which was just months of dedication by the best players in the game. And now even with Leagues 4, players are going to be able to try to complete challenges like 1000 Invocation Doa, which I do feel like was very much catered towards endgame players. And then on the complete opposite spectrum, we have seen PKers like Odablock voice their concerns that there's no real PvP competition going on because Deadman mode doesn't fill that need anymore and it's just catered towards more casual enjoyment. But as far as I know, there is now going to be an actual PKing tournament thanks to his message. So my question to you is, how does the process of making content for a certain group of players start, and what are the priorities there? Do you just take a focus group and start from there, or does the content come first to life and then you just decide who it's for? How do you satisfy all groups of players?
It's a really good question. It's kind of production teamy in, they try to look and see, are we hitting all of our player cohorts? And are they getting content regularly enough? Now, that's kind of a weird statement, right? Because if you're in that cohort, you want all the content to be about you, right? But that's not how the game works.
Mm-hmm.
I genuinely believe that at least over the last 2 years, we've gotten substantially better at making sure that we hit a lot more players. We went from places where it was like TOB and Inferno and all this came out all at once. And it was like, cool, there's all these amazing big late game challenges. But when you look at the numbers of players who are completing them, it's definitely worth having this aspirational content. Everybody loves these pieces of content, but you can't only do harder and harder and harder PVM, right? One thing our game struggles with a lot is having ways for people to get into difficult PVM. For a long time, it kind of just went, oh, like, you can kill Mole, you can do Barrows, and then here's Zulrah. And you're like, oh, wow, like, this actually has mechanics and requires me to change my gear and my prayers and move at the same time, even though it was scripted. Forecath kind of was also, this sort of entry-level boss, but it's a lot more scripted, obviously, right? And obviously you're just using one style at the same time. Your movement only matters for some of the fight, So there's definitely been a desire on the team to design content that can help bridge the gap between players who are not so experienced at PVM and don't understand, that RuneScape is actually a 100-beat rhythm game. And you can only really do that by just sort of doing things incrementally. And that kind of leads into the sort of TOA discussion, which was, we kind of released like a hard mode of Theater of Blood and an entry mode, but we kind of wanted to offer something with a bit more flexibility because even entry to normal is like a pretty big step up. Like, I wouldn't say complete entry, learn the mechanics in entry, and then you're ready for normal. That's just not true in the slightest. So the invocation system offered a lot of granularity to obviously give people a lot of flexibility in making the raid for them. But what we ended up seeing with TOA is that, how to put this, there were a lot of players who love TOB. And TOB is the content, the best content in the game, and they were really hoping that Raids 3 would just be the next best thing. We move over to all doing TOA, and this is also going to be as good as top. And I think the invocation system itself didn't quite satisfy those players in the same way. I think that from a design perspective on the bosses, Hob was very simple, but just had ways to solve it and players to optimize it. Whereas TOA has like very specific solves, if you know what I mean. Like, don't get hit by the boulder or you're dead, or you need to kill this thing or it blows up and kills you. And there doesn't really leave much sort of wiggle room for players to discover fun stuff. I think that Chambers of Xeric's Ulm is a really simple fight that is just on a script timer, and it has some things that'll kill you. It never prescribes how you do that fight once. And because of that, it birthed a lot of innovation from players on how to tackle that problem, and players really pushed it to the limits. I think Tombs of a Mascot is a great raid that didn't quite live up to the expectations of the extremely high level players who are like purely invested in PvM. I still think TOA is an extremely successful raid. I think it is more approachable than any of the raids. I don't think it's necessarily easy, and it certainly has problems with some of the strategies that are involved with like red Xing, and monster defenses, don't tend to scale so well infinitely. I might suggest if we, move on to like raids 4 and stuff, some of the things that I'm going into thinking about are, instead of having like the invocations be, this one's 20 points, this one's 5 points, this one's 10 points, you just go in and configure it to be like, imagine like an entry mode, but you could turn on like, do you want this boss at level 1, 2, 3, or 4? And you could do that on an individual boss basis. That would allow us to curate a better experience, because we're not like trying to juggle all the things. Because, when we're testing Kefri, we're going, cool, what happens with this invocation's turned on? What happens when that invocation's turned on? But do these invocations work well when you scale them up at levels? What happens when you bring in 5 players? It suddenly got really complex really quickly for us to, determine that in playtesting. So I think that there's definitely like feedback and learnings from Raids 3. And as for like just releasing harder content in the game, I did see the No Monkey video. We've certainly tried to with a lot of things, like the Desert Treasure 2 hard modes, I think went down fairly well. It's something that we're definitely very aware of, and it's something that we want to make sure that we provide content to that player cohort. But at the same time, we probably can't spend a year on a raid that's only for them. So we need to figure out how the progression system works. At least like most players who are interested in PvM. It doesn't need to be completely noob friendly. I think that's something that I believe quite strongly in MMOs is you can have a quite high base level and then go, you just need to get good. But you also need to provide the tools for players to get there, right? As for the PvP stuff, I'm not really like an expert, I suppose, on that for what kind of content they want and don't want. I know that we've obviously hired Mod Manked fairly recently, and we have had a dedicated PvP team for all of this year. I know that Wilderness Bosses went down fairly well. There is definitely a desire in the team to, maintain having a team that primarily works on PvP content. And I believe that's the correct thing for the game, because even though I'm not super knowledgeable about PvP, at least across the entire year, every player of every type should have something that they look forward to. They're like, oh, I can't wait for this to come out. That's going to be sick for me. I don't care about this. I don't care about that. I don't care about leagues. I don't care about raids. But like this quest, I'm super excited for it. This PvP content, I'm super excited for it. This skilling update, I'm super excited for it, right? I think that it's important to make sure that all players feel like they've got their update that's for them.
But by the way, I'm coming back to your previous point about Dooms of a Mascot being successful. Just to put into perspective, I made a Dooms of a Mascot guide, and it has almost now 400,000 views, and every day it gets 1,000 more views, and it keeps getting views, and every day more people comment on it. Anyone can go on that video right now, see the comment section, and be like, hey, I've never done like any sort of like realistic PvM before in this game. Your guide helped me out, and now I want to go do something else as well. So just to put that into perspective, hundreds of thousands of people probably have started their PvM experience from Dooms of a Mascot and now are trying out new content as well. And I think that's like one of the main reasons why it is very, very successful, despite some people saying that, like it's too easy or it's not challenging enough or something like that. But again, they are thinking from their perspective, and if they want proof that it is successful, just go to my video and just read the comment section. There are thousands of people saying that it's helped them a lot, and it has made their PvM experience in Notsko RuneScape much better.
Yeah, I could honestly believe that. I don't have the numbers at hand. I obviously saw, I think everybody saw, right, the completions board for how many completions were actually being done per day.
Currently, it's around 50 million. It's
actually bonkers.
Yeah, I think it's attempts, not completions though. I think TOP has like 20 million right now or something like that, and it's been out like 5 years now.
Yeah, I have no idea how many completions, but I also know that completions board wasn't there on launch, so it probably doesn't have a lot of them.
Yeah. But
there definitely would have been a ton like on launch day, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody knows how unaccessible TOB is. It's not even just the difficulty of the content. Even if you were good enough to get into TOB, if you don't have KC, you're not getting into good groups unless you've got a good friend connection to get you into those groups. So you're probably going in bad groups, which probably means you're failing to other bad players' mistakes and not necessarily your own. And then, like, maybe you make a mistake and it fails the group. Like, if you're in an experienced group, people are just like, screw this. Like, maybe you got, like, you know, you joined, I can't remember what the TOB world is, but you joined, you know, there, you got some people who are like, even like 150, 200 KC to like say, yeah, we'll take you. We're not super experienced, but, you know, we know what it's like to learn. Then you wipe them at Verzik or something stupid like that. They're not going to let you go in again. So it just feels like really bad. I think that boss mechanics aside of like, is it satisfying for high-end players and all this kind of, you know, TOA stuff, just not failing on one mistake is actually probably a massive difference in the accessibility of TOA. The fact you can just go again, the fact that there are options to give you infinite lives, even though you're getting no loot at the end, it matters so much more to just be able to hit the go again button. I'm not sure if you've played any like Dark Souls games or like Elden Ring, but something they do, I guess like Elden Ring did this. The other games notoriously had really bad runs to boss rooms, but a lot of the boss spawns are like right outside the boss room in Elden Ring. So even though they're really difficult, even though you messed up for like the 50th, 60th time, it's just so easy to quickly go in again and like refine your strategy and try again. And I think that's something that I think has been a big success from TOA and its, you know, accessibility and getting people to feel like they could have a shot at it, you know?
Yeah, and to add on top of that, you can do solo, which is nice. You can just go in zero invocation and learn just the simple mechanics and start from there and just keep going up, you know, 100, maybe you get to 150 and you can go to mass worlds and maybe you can find a team, you know, and you can just start your own adventure. And you feel like you're like comfortable, or if you feel like you know everything, you've done a few runs already, then you can get into teams and then you can all fail together, I guess, in Aka's room, because everybody fails there.
I mean, absolutely, right? Like, I think being able to get that experience yourself is important.
Yeah.
Before you join teams. I know I tweeted about this recently, but my mom plays the game, right?
Oh, I
She
saw
played
that.
for a while. She played it back in the day when, you know, I was a noob at the same time. And, you know,
Yeah.
like when I was like 13 or whatever. So like we go way back and she's awesome. Something like she was saying to me was like she's been asking me a lot and I need to get around to it. It's like, hey, can you help me with Barbarian Assault? Getting my level 5 rolls and stuff, because she's really just so scared of going in there and messing up, right? And if you like, I know like Barbarian Assault, like, oh, it's not the most difficult content, but like Defender role can be kind of confusing, right? If you're not used to it. So I need to go in and help my mum with that, I suppose, at some point. But that is a thing that players feel is like, oh, I don't really want to be the person who lets a team down. I don't want to be called out for being bad at the game. You know, it's...
Yeah, I feel that. I've been feeling that for the last 20 years. I'm still feeling that to this day.